what if I'm mistaken? What if I'm not really transgender? What if, you know, I mean, really, what if I'm making a mistake in some capacity? And I eventually wrote down a list of, like, I swear to God, it was like 50 arguments to go through of reasons why I might not be transgender and I might be mistaken. And it took me going through each one of them and disproving each of them before I was really able to be comfortable enough to accept it.
Okay, so what do you like about this world?
This world in particular, is something that I've very recently been, accustomed to and only seen for the first time a little bit ago. But genuinely, I think this kind of world, when I look for worlds in VRChat, they all sort of have this sort of same vibe. Maybe some of the colors and some of the lighting's a little different. But I genuinely enjoy worlds with a lot of, all around cozy and relaxing atmospheres.
Mm-hmm.
Either that, or sometimes I go into worlds that are more, you know, outside, super sunny, lots of grassy fields, very wide open and cozy spaces, and that and the like is very, very appealing to me, and that's what really, gets me in a good mood, I guess is a good way to put it.
Okay, so you don't have to give your exact name. You can give a nickname, but what would you like to be called?
Just Lily.
Okay, so Lily, how old are you, or what age range are you in?
I'm currently 19 years old.
Where were you born, and where do you live now?
I was born in, not to be too specific, but I was born in, New Mexico,
Mm-hmm.
and in, obviously, United States. And I currently live, in Washington State, where I'm going to university.
Okay. I don't know. Barely scratching by. Can we really do this interview? Are you sure? Are you fluent enough? Are you? What other languages do you know?
Yo hablo un poco en español, cuando... Oh god, it's very bad, it's very rough. But, I had quite a few years of Spanish in high school, so...
Hmm. Is there any other languages you
And
want to
then I
learn?
also guess... Um... You know, that's an interesting question because I've always thought, Japanese and Korean were really interesting language to learn.
Popular
Um...
answers.
Yeah, popular answer, especially for VRChat, right? But,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure how worthwhile it would be because it's a lot of effort,
Mm-hmm.
and I just don't. So ultimately, while I find those languages really interesting, language learning and languages in general just isn't something I'm super passionate about, so it sort of gets pushed aside.
Time to
Oh
ask
god.
the most difficult question. Are you ready?
Uh-huh.
What is your favorite color?
Shit, I can't answer that actually. I have very, I have two favorite colors. Okay, so whenever I answer my favorite color, I said red or blue.
Mm-hmm.
But it's very specifically, like, I know it, kind of see it red, and the same thing for a blue. It's a very, like, a shiny, lighter blue, and, like, the red is more like a red magenta
Mm. Well,
mix. It's a very much, I know it when I see it for both of them.
so you're either a blue gang or a traitor. So which is it?
Imposter.
There is a wrong answer.
Yeah, I never know what to say. Just go with, like, the redder one. The red.
Okay, so
I think as I'm getting older, I'm liking pink more.
What brings you to be at your best self?
So that's also, I feel like all the questions are going to be very loaded for me because I tend to think a lot. I overthink a lot too, but which has its positives and negatives sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
But ultimately, I feel like I'm my best self when I incorporate a few different aspects of my life. It's never one thing, it's a whole bunch of. So generally when I'm surrounded by compassionate people and I'm in a place of good mental health to where I have self-compassion, either overall it's just compassion is very important to me, as well as I definitely have a side of me that really likes productivity and optimization and inner workings of things, so definitely working on my self-productivity for whatever goals I want to reach or whatever facets of my life I'm striving towards too. That stuff is... I don't always have to be making oh, sorry. That ruined it, but ultimately, as long as I'm making progress on my productivity, I say I'm more satisfied with that. Although I do always have, it's hard to gauge whether like you're doing enough sometimes, doing too much, too little. So it's finding that balance of getting enough done.
Mm-hmm.
And finally, I very much like being thrilled and excited and being very active in one way or another. It doesn't necessarily have to be physically. I actually don't care too much towards physical being active all the time, although I do enjoy it. But I found that really like getting myself going and working towards to being good at something, or for a practical example, I play a lot of competitive games like Overwatch or League of Legends, Valorant. And those kind of games, like working towards them, like even though it's hard sometimes, and getting really good at those games and competing is something I also really enjoy. So those are the main things.
What problems have you gone through or are you currently going through that you'd like to talk about?
Well, let's see. I think the main thing I wanted to talk about was how I went through and I'm currently going through the process of more deeper self-reflection and introspection about myself and what sort of changes that's led to in my life.
Mm-hmm.
So now the question is, where do I want to start with that? I think when I was very young, around maybe middle schoolish, I had sort of thought I had figured pretty much everything about myself. At that time, I already knew, like, which is pretty early for some people, but I already had sort of an idea of what sort of career path I wanted to do, what sort of, like, aspects of life I wanted to pursue, what I wanted to be when I was older. And a lot of other parts about myself I didn't really know yet. I thought I did know. And I had in the back of my mind, obviously, you change when you get older. Your tastes develop.
Mm-hmm.
You could be a totally different person someday. And I knew that, and I knew I would change in ways I wouldn't understand. But I still didn't understand it, right? So I had felt at that time that I really wasn't going to change. And, one of the biggest aspects at that time that I didn't really understand was I was definitely very depressed a lot of the time at that age, and that had sort of been something that I kind of had accepted. I didn't have a lot of friends always, I mean, I was social here and there, but I never really got close to people. And I had a lot of self-doubt in terms of my, ability to talk to people or ability to make friends, or, that people wouldn't like to hear me, or that I remember in school a lot, I've always been really hard on myself with, like, the expectations I've put on myself, and just the general way that, like, my mind spirals and snowballs down into negative thinking. And the biggest one for me was that I felt at the time that I didn't have anything worthwhile to say because other people would just say things better, or other people would just do things better. And I had sort of solidified in my mind this idea that I didn't really have anything worthwhile to say. Nobody really wanted to hear me speak. I was annoying. I was, something that nobody wanted around. Even when there were people in my life who clearly spoke to the contrary, I was so ingrained in this negative thinking that I just totally blocked it out of my mind. I remember some days specifically at school where I would try to, and this was like really ingrained in like depression, so this is really unhealthy. It was really unhealthy, but I'd have days where I tried to talk as little as possible because I didn't want to annoy other people, or I felt that if I didn't say a word other than what I was mandatory asked to do, ask questions in class, etc., then, I wouldn't be able to bug other people. And I have two main thoughts when I think about that now. Is one, which is how real it still felt, and how I can still feel myself being able to empathize with my past self in that way that I think. And I still have, parts of that I still think today. And at the same time, the other part of me knows that it was just so terrible. That wasn't me at all. That wasn't like, I blinded myself to the truth that, like, and what I discovered eventually over time is that, it's okay to bug people, right? And, I can either have something worthwhile to say, or I cannot. And I can learn how to have something worthwhile to say. And it's a process. And, other aspects about myself, like, my gender and sexuality, or my, in general, just worldview. It changed so much. And, that's a nice story, a nice sentiment, however, right? But, how does this apply to me? How does this apply to other people? And I think ultimately what caused me to undergo those changes was the fact that I started being so much more introspective. So often, my habits were, maybe social anxiety. I would talk to a person, I would say something really stupid, I would regret it, I would think about it for hours, it was like, it was stuck in my head, stuck in my head, stuck in my head. And the way that I would alleviate that anxiety was to just, play video games at first, or watch TV, or just some other way to distract myself from what was bugging me. Which I want to clarify is not wrong to do. Sometimes you definitely need to calm down so you can think about things. But that was the problem. I calmed down by distracting myself, but I never came back to actually process what was bugging me in the first place. And that caused me so often to make false assumptions about myself, to not really understand what I was thinking or why. And that was really only alleviated when I started very, very, very slowly, and even now, it's like at a crawl space sometimes. But where I encounter an issue, I encounter something that bugs me, I feel some way about myself that I want to improve. Maybe it's my talking to people, for example. That's what we've sort of been. Sorry, I'm hitting my controllers. But talking to other people, for example, it was something I really had to deeply think about of how I would be able to improve my ability to talk to people, to gain the courage, to get out of my comfort zone at first. And, at first that was very hard. That was, like, I'm not going to deny that. That was very, very difficult for me to actually can get to the point where I could convince myself that it was worth it for me to actually talk to other people and, try to add something to their lives as well as improve my ability to talk to people. And that's really the hardest part, is honestly convincing yourself. And that introspection that I came across, that ability to not even necessarily just question my motives, but just in general think about them and think about why and think about how I would, ideally want to be as a person if I didn't feel all the crushing anxiety and self-doubt that I sometimes feel. And it took years. It took years of talking, as an example, was something I think I picked up more quickly because I was lucky enough to have, parents who were very supportive about that thing and made sure I couldn't be too socially anxious or away from other people. And generally with talking to people in general, I was always a very social person as a very little kid. So that part of me was that part of myself I was able to come to terms with, and I feel like now I'm definitely far from, I ideally want to be, but I'm a lot more social and comfortable in my ability to socialize. But even with that, and especially other aspects of my life that I'm not really comfortable talking about, to an audience, but it took a long time, and I mean a heck of a long time, of me constantly thinking about myself. What do I want to be? What do I want to do? What values do I have? What matters to me? What do I want to improve upon? What are my priorities? I could go on, right? And it's all about thinking about it and convincing yourself to make the first step. And that first step, I'm gonna be repeating myself now, but it took years, absolutely years, of me molding over parts of my identity and the way I thought about myself before I even was comfortable even thinking, like, associating my identity with this part of myself that really was a part of me all along. And I think that's where that really ends. So my concluding thoughts is,
Well, what do you mean by the part of yourself that's been there all along? It almost sounds as though there's been somewhat of a battle between this part of yourself and the other.
that is exactly correct, actually. When I was in that middle school period and I never processed these thoughts and negative feelings that I had because I was scared to, as a coping mechanism, I made false assumptions about myself. I thought that I wanted to be, like this person. I wanted to grow up to be, way more. I'm trying to give a good example, but ultimately I made a bunch of negative assumptions, oft very much so negative assumptions about myself that just weren't true until I was able. So, in a way, you're correct. It totally is a battle between the negative assumptions and expectations that I had about myself and trying to discover what those, you know, who I really am, who I really have become, who I really want to be. And that back and forth is absolutely brutal. I think a battle is a beautiful example for trying to sort through the negativity and the assumptions to figure out what's real and what's not.
So it sounds as though you were trying to piece together your inner compass rather than the map that society tries to give everyone. You know, you look at your compass and it points one way, and then the map tells you to go the other way. You followed the map before, and once you get to the destination, it sounds as though it's not really resonating with you, it's not satisfying, it's not fulfilling. But when you start to follow your own compass and it's pointing like your true north, you start to feel more fulfilled. And but this is where it gets really difficult, is that when the map tells you to go the complete opposite direction, you're kind of confused with what to do, how to manage your expectations, how to figure out, you know, what your real values are, and where that's going to lead in your life. And just the
Yeah, and
that
that can be. That is totally correct, and I think that that is a huge challenge in everyone's life in one capacity or another.
mm-hmm.
And sometimes it's totally okay to have to follow the map for a little while
Mm-hmm.
before you can get back to your true north and on your compass. And like for me, for example, I had a map planned out. I'd convinced myself my compass was pointing a completely different direction.
Mm-hmm.
I was totally fooled, and it took me so long to even tweak the compass slightly in the right direction. And even then, it totally doesn't even point the full right way yet.
So what I kind of hear from that is, you know, life is not as simple as it seems, and we're not given everything that, you know, we would want, but we already do have what we need, and we have to, you know, work with what we got. So we might have the map and it tells us to go a certain direction, and maybe when we go in that direction long enough, we can actually find a piece to either add or help repair our compass. So like if it didn't have the, you know, the face, the glass, the either of the hands, you know, maybe we find that in doing something we really don't like, because then that indicates to us that, okay, do not head in this direction, do not do this thing, and you can kind of add that piece to your compass of, okay, one of my values really is not this. So it's true that, you know, you don't start with a fully built and polished compass, but you also need somewhere to go. And, you know, that's sort of what societal maps or expectations kind of are useful for, is it gives something, and something is better than nothing.
You know, speaking to this sort of map and compass analogy that we've sort of come up with, I think something that's always been super important to me is arriving at the understanding that it's going to be okay somehow. And it's a very loaded statement for a 2-word sentence, it's okay, because of how different it is for other people. For the longest time, I looked at what I thought were the finite sets of possible paths I could take with my life. And you know what? I really wasn't okay with any of them. And that sort of feeling that no matter where I go, it's not going to be okay, that was the most soul-crushing thing to me. And what really stopped me in the first place from trying to move forward at all. Because I felt like, you know, you can move forward, great, but what's the point? I'm not going to end up anywhere I want to be anyway. And this introspection is all about, understanding what your okay is. What can convince you that, it'll turn out alright in the end. And I see this personally with a lot of people search out and seek relationships because they believe that if they get a girlfriend or a boyfriend or a partner, that person will be the one that makes it all okay. That person will tell them that it'll be okay in the end. That they need another person to be there okay. And while that can be a great and beautiful thing sometimes, ultimately I do believe that your okay lies within you and no one else. If you've truly found your okay, then no, it doesn't depend on anybody else. It doesn't even depend on the world or anything as you know it. It's just you. I think that's just immensely powerful.
Because once you lose that person, heaven forbid, what are you going to do then? And how will you continue on with your life?
And I believe that even if you never do lose that person, it could be true love, but there's still more to your okay.
So that sort of goes into several
that even
paths.
applies to me. Yeah.
It sounds as though
I was just gonna.
It's okay to be with. It's okay to take a few zigzags in life. It doesn't have to be a predetermined path.
Of course it is.
Linear by any means. It's okay to go many different directions until eventually you find where your home is in who you are and what you want to do and whatever that looks like. Maybe you have multiple homes. Maybe you try out several careers until eventually something or a mixture of things truly resonates so much that you feel truly alive.
Yeah.
And the other thing was for you to feel okay. I sort of see that akin to kind of what I've been doing in my research with what helps you feel happy, fulfilled, content, at peace, what's meaningful to you, and just kind of all those things together would lead to you feeling okay in who you are and in the life that you live.
The bottom line, I feel like for me, and this is, every person, it's going to be different, but for me, the bottom line has always been this idea of introspection and discovering more about myself.
Mm-hmm.
And that questioning, that understanding of what's right and wrong for you will take you so far in life. So far in a direction you didn't even know you wanted to go in. And that's just been incredibly important for me.
What was the defining moment that led to you beginning a lot of introspection?
That's the thing about it. Is I don't really think that for introspection there is a defining moment. Because the most important part about introspection is that even if it's just the tiniest bit of progress in even not even necessarily going forward in the right direction, but convincing yourself to go forward. Each one of those moments where you get a step no matter how small, closer to even feeling like you can take a step forward. Each one of those moments is a defining moment. And, if I to more exactly answer the question, it's particularly when I looked back and I said, oh wow, I'm a lot different than what I thought it was going to be. I can recall a specific day in high school when it was very sunny, and I was just thinking about me in middle school and how I thought I'm gonna be depressed for the rest of my life, and that sucks. And I looked back when I was in high school and I thought, I've been through the therapy, I've been through the introspection, I've made more friends, I've changed my life in so many different ways that I'm not depressed anymore. I'm not at all what I thought that I was going to be. And so, in a weird, twisted way, the defining moment is almost when it's already over. And instead, you should be looking to any kind of minuscule progress you can make, no matter how small.
So, just in hearing that, it sounds as though be immediate, be in the present, pay attention to what you can do now, and the way you describe that, it sounds as though you're connecting the dots, but looking backwards. You're reflecting on, how you were, things you thought about, how you felt, having the idea that you're going to just feel the same forever, an indefinite amount of time, and that's not the case now. Things are entirely different, and not everything turned out how you expected them to. And it's not just one thing, but just every step that you take towards doing what you feel like you need to do in your life are all defining moments. Just having that courage to convince yourself to take those first steps over and over again. So that being said, you had talked about introspection and then also having the courage to go out and step outside your comfort zone to discover your interests and who you are. What led to taking those steps to figure out who you are?
You know what? This is gonna sound pretty funny, but it was honestly for me in particular. Oh my god. For me in particular, it was honestly my anxiety. I wanted to know who I was so that I could make plans for the future. And part of discovering who I was came as a byproduct of that. Because since I wanted to make plans for the future because of my anxiety, I eventually started to value more and more knowing about myself so that I can make those plans. And eventually, once that started to get going, I sort of realized that knowing myself and figuring out my values was important in and of itself, completely unrelated to, future plans or my anxiety. And so for me personally, I didn't start out with it. It's only that I realized later how important it was.
What is the most difficult thing or the most challenging part about this problem?
The most challenging thing about any of this is just trying to do it as often as I can. It's sometimes every day, it's sometimes a day a week, it's sometimes hopefully not less than that, but you get the idea that it's very sporadic, and the hard part really is just thinking about it and contending with your negative feelings and sort of getting out of your comfort zone.
I heard in there that you were talking about feeling uncomfortable and that it's challenging to do it as often as you can. Are those two linked together, that when you think about yourself and who you are and what you want to do, that it feels uncomfortable?
Of course, it is beyond, it's, aside from physical and emotional pain, it's exceedingly difficult to question your own beliefs no matter what they are, especially the beliefs about who you are, because that is the entire basis for which you feel and think in the first place. And it comes back to this idea I talked about earlier, about this idea of you're okay and the feeling that things are going to be okay. When you do change your identity and start to question it, it's uncomfortable because you have to mess and change your idea of how it's going to be okay too. And even stepping outside of your, if where you're okay makes you feel like you're comfortable, then even stepping outside of that for a second to reflect back on yourself makes you exceedingly uncomfortable. And as much as I wish I could just make 1,000 leaps forward super easily, it's still super hard. I'm still discovering stuff about myself all the time.
Like how to take a
And
shower so that you don't smell so much?
you're not including that. You are editing that out or I'm gonna kill you. There is no... If you're including that, then Ryan also smells and his YouTube channel sucks.
I'm totally including that.
Oh my god.
Okay, good.
Yeah, let's do an interview. Yeah, it'll be fun. Yeah. Being humiliated live. Even if I could jump super far out of my comfort zone.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, that's it. I wish I could jump super far out of my comfort zone. But for one, I really can't. It's still hard every day to do, to go even just a single step out, much less 1,000 steps. And the other part about me, I think this is something a lesson I took from, middle school me, is that even if I could force myself to do it, to jump out 1,000 steps out of my comfort zone, that's not meaningful to me. I don't even want to be that uncomfortable all the time. That's just not worth it to me either. And the little steps, while everybody does want to make, unbounded progress forward, it's as much as you have to push yourself, you have to limit yourself too.
Yeah, I really like that, because you have to sort of be aware of your stress-pleasure balance, and while you do need to grow and discover yourself so that you can move toward finding meaning and purpose and just peace in your life, well, you do have to make progress in that, but at the same time, kind of like in a game, if you have a health, hunger, thirst bar or whatnot, you have to make sure that you're not too stressed out to where you're starting to hurt yourself and taking damage. And if you throw yourself so far out into the middle of nowhere, like you're a typical student, never done construction work, never traveled overseas, only speak English, and you do a construction job overseas in the middle of nowhere. You don't have friends or family.
Oddly specific.
I'm not totally not talking about my life because and I'm being serious though. Like, no, I'll be specific about my life later, but no, just you throw yourself in complete polar opposites in multiple ways. You're gonna have a hard time calming down and being able to stabilize yourself so that you can, you know, have that introspection and to be able to grow from, you know, what you're doing, because otherwise you're just going to be anxious and nervous all the time, and if you're in
And you're
that.
not going to make any progress anyway.
Exactly. And if you
It's
stay.
literally, it's literally the equivalent of shooting yourself in the foot. Like, if you want to learn how to run a marathon, you learn by, you know, training over and over a long period of time, so that you can eventually reach the level of endurance that you can run a marathon. But if you go, I need stronger feet, so let me just shoot my foot so that it grows back stronger. Like, no, don't do that.
Yeah,
Everyone knows that you
kids,
should not do that.
Kids and everyone else watching, let's not do that. We're not condoning to shoot yourself in the foot by any means. All right.
You can push yourself too far.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so really challenging yourself, but also knowing your limits, because, you know, it's a common saying of, you know, biting off more than you can chew, taking on more than you know you can handle, and, you know, as you said with the marathon, if you try to, you know, go straight into it, you're gonna burn out really quick, and that can be really dangerous, especially depending on how you challenge yourself.
And this is coming from a person where I love challenge. Like, I love pushing myself harder and harder as much as I can. But, you know, there's still too much. There's still a level where it's just too much. It's just not fun anymore. Even me, like, I wish I could, you know, go, you know, go super hard all the time. That would be so fun, right? Until you actually do it. And then you realize, oh yeah, you know, it really would be nice to talk to somebody once in a while, or to relax once in a while, go traveling once in a while.
But then
Whatever
you
it is for
can't,
you.
because you push yourself so far, and now you don't have that room for rest and taking breaks and kind of calming back down, because, you know, now you're starting to get into depression territory, panic attack territory, just really uncomfortable places when you are, you know, your stress levels are too high for too long.
And, you know, when I first heard these ideas of, you know, you need balance in your life, and there's such thing as too much of a good thing and too little, and it's all super complicated. You know, my first thought when I heard all those things for the first time is just, oh, I know about that now. So let me just go get a balance from the start, right? Let me just get a balance from the start, just start right away, so I don't have to deal with the, oh no, too much, too little. But that's the whole problem with it, right? Anybody can tell you that you need balance, that it's going to be okay, any of these things. But you're never going to truly understand what that means until you make sense of it yourself. Balance is a wonderful thing to go after, but who the heck knows what balance means?
When you say make sense for it yourself, what I sort of imagine is your balance might be 70-30, because you like to be productive a lot, but you do need some rest, whereas balance for somebody else might actually be 40-60, where they're working 40% of the time, 60% on something else. Completely different, and this is going to make sense completely differently per person and their life, and, you know, whatever goals and things that they're going after.
And that might also change too. Maybe I'm the 70-30 person, and I convince myself that, you know, I'm a hard worker, I have to work all the time, I X and X because of, Y reason and all this stuff, and it's super important that I work hard all the time. And then I realized later that, oh, I'm really a 50-50 kind of person. And the only way I knew that was because 70-30, I was at 70-30, and I realized that wasn't where I wanted to be.
Mm-hmm. And how did you realize that, hypothetically?
How did I realize that? Well, you're at 70-30, you're gonna have some problems with things. You're gonna complain about something. You think about those complaints. Let's say I'm, being a 70-30 means I don't get to travel to Europe for whatever reason. And I decide that, I really want to travel to Europe, and that's more important than working the 70% all the time. And so that clues me into an idea of maybe I'm working too much. And that's all it is. It's really just clues, and you're just making educated guesses in a direction.
Paying attention to really how you're feeling, because I would say, end all be all typically tends to be how people feel, and it's very tragic when people suppress and deal with so much stress that they don't really feel anymore, and they become very numb, and then their compass practically breaks and fuzzes up, and their map is maybe on fire and burning to shreds, and they have no idea what to do or where to go. So
Your feelings will really tell you a lot.
Yeah.
And although they aren't perfect, you can't follow your feelings blindly all the time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They will clue you in a lot more than you think they will.
The way I sort of explain this is you're on a railroad track, and certain paths you take in life are gonna go off a cliff. So people typically see this in advance most of the time, and they'll be able to turn, left or right. But the problem with this is some people only think logically, and some people only live life by their emotions. So a lot of the time they'll need to make a right turn, but they refuse to see logic, and they'll only make left turns repeatedly until they'll make a really horrible decision, and boom, that's a breakup, that's a divorce, that's a job loss, that's drinking and doing drugs to the point of damaging your life. So you want to pay attention to how you feel so you're not miserable at your job. Take a left turn for feelings and right for logic. So let's take a left turn so we don't fall off the tracks. And at the same time, if I'm super anxious about things, and I'm gonna keep bugging my partner about whatever, and I know if I keep doing this, it's gonna stress her out, and she might break up with me. Okay, well, let's take a right turn. What do we need to do? We need to calm down. We need to, cope with whatever we're dealing with. So, you gotta use both compasses, whether by emotions and what you're feeling for things that make you happy, and logic to make sure that you don't derail your life and make a mistake. So they both kind of come together. You have to make lefts and rights in life, not just one or the other.
Yeah. And to the point where I can speak personally from that is when I was a kid, I've come to understand that I'm really much more of an emotional person than I initially thought. And when I was in middle school, I had so much emotion, so much anxiety, that I forced myself to become a logical person. And looking back, that's been a great gift. I enjoy maths now. I enjoy science and technology and all that kind of stuff. and I have a deep appreciation for it, but I really am an emotional person too. And that's just something I really only figured out recently.
It's much to how I grew up. It's almost as though I was in like a very dark fog, a perpetual labyrinth that was completely dark, and to where I could only create light to see a few feet in front of me. And that kind of personifies the degree of how in touch I was with my feelings because of, well, feeling dead inside due to no parental support or connection, among other things. And, you know, fast forward to this day through an absolutely arduous journey, to say the least. You know, I'm now completely in tune with myself, where I am definitely and absolutely more of a feeler than I am a thinker. You know, I have a great deal of empathy and emotional and just human understanding of people and what they go through. I'll be the first person in the room to sort of know, you know, if there's something wrong with someone, or if they're hiding something, if they're trying to, you know, put on their mask. I might not say something all the time, but I know. It's like, that just goes to show you like how much you can change over time. I used to be, you know, super logical. And I only thought. And that kind of led to living a very difficult life, a not so fulfilling life, until I started to unveil and discover, you know, to revivify my emotional self, to resurrect it. Okay, so going back to what you said about confronting yourself and figuring out, you know, who you are and what your values are, and how that, you know, that can be very uncomfortable. What helped you make these confrontations and work on yourself? Like, what helped the most with doing this?
So, I tend to be very practical minded, and honestly, the best thing that I could possibly do is make sure I'm not forgetting the crucial things I feel. So often in my life, I would go from, you know, let's say an example, I'm in class, and let's say somebody said something that made me uncomfortable, but I didn't really understand why, I was just really uncomfortable by it. And as soon as I was trying to think about it, like maybe why, whatever, you know, I move on, I'm on the next class already. I have to focus on an essay I'm trying to write, or something else is more pressing. And I end up totally losing that feeling and forgetting about it entirely. And so, the best thing that I've been able to do is whenever I feel something strongly, and like I said, this is what's helped me. I'm still have a long way to go before I make this, you know, like amazing. But keeping a journal and writing down whenever you feel something very strongly will just go a long way. Because even remembering that something bothered you will start to get it spinning inside your mind. That maybe eventually you might be able to think about it, like, oh, I didn't like when somebody said this because of this reason, and you might not realize that for another week after somebody said it. But if you never wrote it down, you'd never remember it, so you'd never be able to come to any conclusion.
Mm.
And sort of, your mind is amazingly powerful, but it also is really good at tricking itself and, you know, feeling like it's turning itself inside out and like spinning around and all this other stuff, right? And so if you can use something physical, you can actualize your feelings into something like writing or some other equivalent, then it's something physical and tangible you can make that your mind can latch onto so that you can make a lot more progress.
So tying that all together, because, our brains are working a lot and you have a vast amount of thoughts and feelings, that writing it down or getting it out in a physical form, can help translate it to be a lot more understandable. And when you write it down and you can look back on it, you can start to see patterns and themes. Well, I've done this thing 3 times and I've enjoyed it each and every time, or maybe I didn't enjoy being in these situations or being around people who had certain qualities. The brain needs a break, and the best way to give it a break is by journaling, writing things down, getting them out of yourself so that you can be like, hey, I don't have to worry about this anymore because I wrote it down, and you can just let go. And if you maybe need to recall, you just go to wherever you wrote it down.
There's something I used to read a lot of productivity books and general, well, yeah, self-help and productivity books when I was a lot younger. And there's always been one quote that's always really stuck with me, and I try to incorporate as much as I can. Because the mind is really good at generating new ideas. You do it all the time. But the mind is also very terrible at storing those ideas. It's incredibly possible that most of your time is remembering thoughts that you've already had, but you've forgotten about them in one capacity or another.
You know what that reminds me of? You forget 1,000 things every day. Make sure this is one of them.
I personally have gotten a lot into optimizing my mental health in terms of, keeping up my physical health and my exercising and meditating and journaling, etc. And gratitude journals. And I could go on and on about the things that I try to implement into my life, but there is a certain kind of clarity you can get when your mind is free of all the anxieties and things you're trying to remember. And the less the less passive anxieties you have and things trying to grab your attention to distract you, the more you can narrow in and focus on answering the questions that are most important to you. Who am I? What do I want to do?
Mm-hmm. The way I sort of think about that is typically everybody has like an elastic band or a rubber band attached to them, and that can represent distractions, anxiety, anything that's bothering us. And until we can sort of take off that band, if we try to run somewhere, it's just going to snap us back. So like if we were to look off into the horizon over there and imagine that at the peak of that mountain is, everything that we want in life, but we can only get there if we, remove the elastic band. We confront our insecurities, our anxieties. We, limit our stress. We have to focus on getting this band off of us, because otherwise we're gonna start taking the journey there, and then oh man, I can't talk to people. I gotta worry about my job. I gotta worry about my finances. We just get snapped all the way back, and then we're kind of back at square one for the most part of, well, where is my compass pointing? Who am I? And where do I want to be?
Oh god, there's a lot of them. Anything that really distracts you from these things is a negative in some capacity. Now, of course, breaks are incredibly important, and enjoying your life is also something that is, it's literally just as important, even if not more sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
And the best thing that'll tell you if something is hurting you more than it's helping you is just asking the question like, how is doing this thing impacting my ability to think about my life? If you're doing, if you have a terrible sleep schedule and your mind hurts all the time because you're so tired, then that's something that's, that's going to impact your ability to think about your life and make good decisions for yourself. Of course, there's the whole idea of drugs and all that kind of stuff, but everybody already knows that. There's also a large portion of it, in my opinion, of the three, let's say it this way. Aside from drugs and like things people already know about, the three biggest things in your life that can impact your introspection are, of course, your health, your sleep schedule, your exercising. You don't have to meditate, but it does help. Even diet can play a huge factor in your mental health and your ability to think.
Yes, it does.
For the second one, I think peer pressure is insanely powerful in both good and negative ways. If you're surrounded by a group of friends who normalizes, if you're around a group of friends who normalize things that are not what you want from yourself, that will hurt you. Sometimes very bad ways.
So you mean to tell me that if my friends tell me you become doctor now, or hey, like call that kid a loser, that if that becomes normalized, it's bad? Is that what you're saying?
On a more general level, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But specifically when it comes to your own identity and what you think of what you want to do, you will always model those things off of lots of people who are close to you. So if you model if your group of friends, for example, think that school is terrible, or maybe vice versa, they think school is the most important thing in the world, you will internalize that regardless of how you actually feel. And it's way too
Because,
easy to distract yourself because of peer pressure.
well, let's
Because of
walk through
your
that. Why, how specifically would it be bad? Because the second you do what, something bad'll happen.
I don't know what exactly you're talking about.
Because the second that you disagree with the group, you're now standing up for yourself. You're now standing up against everybody else. And regardless if you have a case or not to make about why you're going against a group. So this means if you don't believe in bullying people, if you don't believe in, having to get a doctorate to be successful or content in life, if you don't believe in those things and everyone else around you does, you are now in the minority. You are now going to have to contend with everyone else's opinion and thoughts of you for thinking differently.
Well, yeah, and it really, I know for me in particular, it can be really uncomfortable to voice a differing opinion. That's maybe for the simple fact that you don't want to upset your friend. And ultimately that can, over the long term, that can really have an effect on you. Sometimes it's good, but in our case we're talking about the bad.
Mm-hmm.
You still have to be careful about it. Now going on to the third and final major thing that I think distracts you from being introspective is just distractions within themselves. Video games or scrolling through your smartphone, social media, YouTube. Those are just some of them, but they can be pretty massive. I know a lot of people who are even very close to me, that their response to feeling uncomfortable is opening up their phone, scrolling at something that makes them laugh for half a second, if even that, just to distract them from their own thoughts. That one in particular I feel is very much a silent killer of your own identity and what you want to do with your life.
Distractions, and especially our technology, more specifically our phones.
And the biggest way to get over, especially the phone one, and actually this one is very practical and very doable. Just learn how to be bored. Being bored is something that, if you're not accustomed to it, can feel like the end of the world. Truly. It feels awful. You haven't been bored in a while. But boredom isn't inherently a bad thing either. In fact, it's what will give you the space to think about yourself. Actually, the idea behind the reason why I try to meditate sometimes is it's learning how to be bored, really.
You know, this might be a little bit shocking to some people, but have you ever thought about looking at what boredom is differently? How else might you look at it?
You tell me?
Boredom is actually just a withdrawal on a chemical level. People always know that once you do drugs, you're going to be chasing a high that you'll never be able to get ever again. But this is a little bit less severe. Basically, you have activities that you do every day that you might be at like 50 points of pleasure, right? And when you're going about your days and suddenly you don't have all those things that, you enjoy. Now you're at 30 points of pleasure. You're going to have that gap, and that gap is going to simulate a withdrawal, which we typically call boredom. I'm bored. I just played 3 amazing games for, like 2 weeks straight, and now I don't have anything else left to do. Boring sucks, or reading sucks. I don't want to do my schoolwork because that's actually kind of a bit stressful or only a little bit enjoyable. So all the time we're sort of contending with the lifestyle that we set up for ourselves. However much dopamine or enjoyment chemicals, pleasure chemicals we get in a day is going to dictate how we're able to be successful in the things that we want to do, whether it's working on ourselves, whether it's finding peace. And I would add on that once you do confront your inner demons and you go on that journey of healing and you are successful, that you don't need as much pleasure anymore. Pleasure is to numb the pain. Pleasure is to distract ourselves from what hurts. But when we finally work out what hurts and we figure out who we are and where we want to be, we get to that mountain. We just don't need as much anymore. And that boredom that we're so afraid of actually becomes peace. It's solitude, it's serenity. We can sit with ourselves and not feel the need to chase after anything else. Some might call that enlightenment. We also have to be careful with that too, because there are things that we need to do in our lives. So again, that goes back to the balance. Good?
Yeah. I think something very anecdotal about boredom is that when I think of why I'm bored, it's always because I'm lacking something. I want to be doing something fun or exciting or me feel a certain way or whatever. It's never because I don't want something. It's never because I'm doing nothing. It's because I want something in particular. And in that light, there's nothing inherently wrong about it. And one of a beautiful benefit of understanding yourself more is that, coming to terms with and being fulfilled by what you do and what you spend your time on, that you really can maybe just look out over the moonlight or be a pretty sunset and say, like, not bored, I'm just satisfied with where I am.
So it also kind of sounds like finding meaning, fulfillment, peace, to where your gratitude is just so inherent that you can be content with very little. So much so that even just sitting and watching a sunset is enough.
And it's a really beautiful thing in and of itself when you can get to that point. But, like I said at the very beginning, that's ultimately something you look back on. Once you're sort of more at the end, you can say, oh yeah, I do. Watching a sunset is enough. That's only after, sort of, what I call introspection and sort of looking at yourself as often as you can.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever that is.
I kind of coined that as what I like to call emotional freedom. You've taken one of the hardest journeys in the human experience, and you finally reach that point where you are completely at peace. Less than 1% of human beings reach this point. And that's what we're looking to change here as we do these interviews. We want to help people find the courage to complete their journey successfully so that they can live their lives in as much peace and fulfillment and happiness as possible.
Yeah, and it really is just worth it so you can feel better about yourself and do what you want to do.
Mm-hmm. Not feel
worth
that.
It, right?
Very worth it, because it kind of sucks to have that gravitational pull of anxiety or depression or something else that takes away from you living more in the moment. What other problems, whether in the past or present, would you like to talk about?
I think I should go a little bit more in depth about parts of myself that I sort of denied or falsely assumed when I was younger and sort of how that developed.
Mm-hmm.
Because I am actually transgender. I am male to female. And that is something I can't believe that I would ever say or even have the remote confidence to say without spiraling into a pit of anxiety. because that has been something that I definitely never thought possible. Like, at all. And this is also very much entwined with middle school me and a lot of the depression that I experienced. And that one of the main false assumptions I made about myself was that I was male and that I wanted to live up to masculine standards. And a whole bunch of other stuff. And, you know, toxic masculinity, blah, 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 and all the whatever other stupid expectations I had set for myself.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, that depressed me. A lot. Like, it was just... It just felt like there was constantly always a weight that I was dragging around. Whenever I talked, whenever I was doing something with my body language, or, you know, being with other people, or thinking about my future. It was all weighed down in some way that I didn't realize. And this goes back to pay attention to the feeling, especially the small negative naggings you feel.
Mm-hmm.
Because that was enough to indicate to me eventually that something was wrong. And I never even realized it until after I had a close friend of mine in, I think about beginning of high school-ish, put on... She asked me if she could practice her eye makeup. Because she had no one else to practice on, and she wanted to practice on other people for, I can't remember what reason.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I of course said yes, because I didn't really care, and I was just like, yeah, sure, I'll help you out. And she put it on, and it looked pretty good. And as I was like wearing it, I was just sort of looking in the mirror, and I was like, what the heck? This should make me feel, if I am this cisgender male, that blah blah blah, masculinity, blah 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 blah, I should hate this. This should be awful, right? Because I mean, a huge part of toxic masculinity is man in dress. Oh god, that's like the worst thing in the world. Like, you can't get worse than that.
Mm-hmm.
And so I expected myself to hate it. And I just didn't. I actually liked it. And I was incredibly perplexed. So much so that I was just like... I was honestly kind of pretty happy about it, because I didn't expect to feel good over something that I thought I would hate. And that began my super long development into closer examining feelings I had. I had something that later awoke in me was a repressed memory that I had. Or not repressed, but more like buried. In which I had seen... I remember being very, very little, maybe like 6 years old or something, and seeing something on the television about sexual reassignment surgery. And I can remember myself on the couch thinking, what the heck? You can do that? With a little bit of like a desire behind it. And I think that was something that was exceedingly surprising to me. I never in my wildest dreams would I have thought that I was transgender. For the longest time I even... I'm ashamed to say this, but I did look down on it in a lot of ways. I was very much... I thought it was weird at times, or... I just didn't understand it. I wasn't quick to hate on it, but I definitely didn't like it either. And I guess from that point, it was... that was only the beginning. once I sort of cracked my shell and opened up something that would drastically change my identity and my worldview, it made me excited, but it also scared me a lot. And I wouldn't even feel comfortable even, even for, pretending to say I was transgender. Even, like, pretending to say that took, a year or two at most for me even to start to process it or even think, maybe. And, to talk about it means, like, I have to talk about the host of self-doubt I experienced, or, just the inworkings of my mind that went in and out between thinking, what if I'm mistaken? What if I'm mistaken? What if I'm not really transgender? What if, really, what if I'm making a mistake in some capacity? And I eventually wrote down a list of, like, I swear to God, it was like 50 arguments to go through of reasons why I might not be transgender and I might be mistaken. And it took me going through each one of them and disproving each of them before I was really able to be comfortable enough to accept it. And that's really what I meant by how it has to be, when you're thinking about introspection and about yourself, it has to be so... It can only happen slowly, because that's the only amount that I could take. But I had to do it over many years, continuously, mulling it over, sitting in my bed going, oh my god, what the heck am I thinking? I'm so weird. Why is this bothering me? Nobody else goes through this, right? And bottom line is, it was hard. It was really hard, and even now, I'm not fully comfortable expressing myself all the time. And I guess all I have to say about it is I did figure it out. I did figure out I was transgender eventually. It did end up being okay in the end. And, now that I think about it, when I was, in middle school, every possible future I could imagine myself, I was male. And that all felt horrible, and I could never understand why. And so I had to convince myself that it wasn't going to be okay. Until now. And then, oh boy, I'm a heck of a lot happier. And I feel like it's... VRChat lag for a second there. And I feel like it's only added my personality and just my life in general. Especially with how afraid I had been that it would take away something from me.
But in actuality, just speaking on behalf of our overall friendship relationship, if you hadn't had the courage to be who you really are, we might not have ever met and built up as much of a bond as we have. It just goes back to that saying of, don't be afraid to be who you really are, because you might miss out on those who appreciate that version of you, the true self.
Definitely. So, my life has just improved in countless ways, even though it was an uncomfortable ride getting there.
So would you say that sometimes things have to get worse before they get better?
Usually if something's getting better, you've either been through so much worse, or you're doing it wrong. Sad truth is it's almost always going to be hard to do it. That doesn't mean it's not worth it.
Yeah, going back to the mountain off in the distance there. You get to the top, there's going to be, blood, sweat, and maybe tears. It's going to be a struggle. But is it worth it to reach the top and find, or finally get yourself to be at a place where you have conquered all of your inner demons? You have healed all of your burns, all of your wounds, and you're able to sit with yourself without anything nagging you physically, emotionally, mentally, and spiritually. To be able to sit with yourself in that peace. Speaking personally, I value that more than the peak feeling of love that I had for my first love. That peace is so much more valuable than that. So much to what you've said about the journey and figuring out that you're transgender. Where are you at now in your journey, or how would you describe that?
I'm at the phase where I am in my real life. People that I am really afraid will judge me, or never want to talk to me again, or even just find me weird. Honestly, that really is something that gnaws on my mind, and the next step for me is a blessing and a curse. I now know where I want to go, much better than I did before, but I need the courage to actually step forward. And just like before, it's still very hard. I still get very nervous all the time. And the only thing left is to really just go for it.
So, coming out to your friends in person, your family in person, and just fully going through with it and not turning back.
Yeah, and I am extremely, and I mean extremely, extremely fortunate because I have had nothing but positive experiences with even the majority of real life friends that I've come out to. And even something like my parents and my situation is just incredible compared to, the stories that I've definitely heard. That makes me very grateful. But at the same time, it doesn't make it any easier. I'm still anxious about it.
What do you feel like will give you the motivation or the courage, or what will help you to take that next step?
Honestly, I wish there was something in particular that could help me do it. But the bottom line is I just need to sit down and convince myself to go forward with it. I need to talk to myself and reason through it until I feel comfortable enough to be uncomfortable.
Sounds like an oxymoron in itself a little bit.
Oh, it is, for sure.
Well, I think that this would be more of the coaching part that I'd have to say is that you're maybe used to stepping 3 steps out of your comfort zone, and maybe 50 steps is too much. But I think that at this point, it might be reasonable to say that going through with this would be like 25, and it'd be really difficult, and it would, last for longer than usual because of how many things it changes in your day-to-day life. But as you said yourself, you had 50 arguments that you went through to just convince yourself that you are trans. So how many more arguments do you need for living your life in your authentic self so that you can have more peace and enjoyment and less stress?
If I were to give you a number, probably only around 6. But that's still 6 that I haven't gone through yet. So, I mean, same thing for me as it's always been. One of my big issues is, in fact, organizing a wardrobe. Organizing when I would come out to people and stuff about names and, how I would tell people. And it's... most of it is honestly just set a time to make progress. Go out someday this week, this month, buy one outfit, just one outfit, to add it, and that's it. It's all the progress I need to make, and I'd create. But I'm not quite there yet. I haven't quite organized everything in the way that I'd like to. I give you a random number. It's not actually 6.
Okay, so we got 1. How many more?
Wardrobe wasn't even there when I thought of the 6 of them. Doesn't even... Other parts of it, so the most generalized, if I were to sum it up as many points as possible, it would be my wardrobe, my physical health, like my looks, my skincare, etc. Actually coming out to friends, actually coming out to parents, and organizing, continuing to tell my doctor and organize more health checkups so I can continue at a good pace.
So wardrobe, physical health, coming out about it to friends and family. All right. Well, 3 is not 6. That's a whole lot less.
It was 6 when I thought about it. That's what I mean, though. That's a good example of me, making a false assumption before I really thought about it.
Well, now we've thought about it.
I wrote them down and said them out loud. I didn't know it was less than I thought.
So if we were to sort of work on, goals to get through this, you mentioned one yourself, is that you buy, an outfit or even organize one like once a week or, every so often. And then that's it. And then eventually you're going to have like a whole wardrobe for, your day-to-day life, whether it's at the gym or it's at work or it's at school or it's at an event or party, whether it's at home. You're going to have, something for everything. And, then, your physical health and things like that. Well, to me, that sounds very doable because, you said you already exercise. You can buy, skincare products or whatever you need to do makeup or hair.
It's also a large part of it is researching.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I don't even know where to start a lot of the time. Luckily, I have Need some friends that can help me with those things, but you know, it's still gotta go through with it, right? So
Mm-hmm. So it sounds as though,
that's always
just
a whole big deal.
taking, or, well, it sounds like convincing yourself so that you can take that first step so that you can have the courage to start doing those things. And then the third being...
Thank you for explaining it overly complicated, but also entirely exactly how I said it.
And the third thing is like, well, coming out to friends and family, and just you've kind of already been doing a lot of that, and sounds as though that there are still some people in your life that you haven't come out to yet. Hmm.
No, I haven't come out to some people yet. And borderline, it's just working through some of my lingering thoughts about it and working up the courage to actually do it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, a big part of who I am really, still from middle school, I guess, really worries about annoying other people, standing out to them. And so there's a part of me that doesn't want to come out to certain people in my life, especially in like more professional contexts, like, school or whatever. Teachers
Mm-hmm.
is a good example. Until I am like fully transitioned, which is gonna take a while still.
Mm-hmm.
And it's sort of a question of whether I want to completely ignore that feeling because it's not something that's reasonable. I truly want, and just coming out tomorrow, for example, or waiting until I'm pretty much fully transitioned or almost fully transitioned and dealing with, confusion in the other direction, if that makes sense. Or anywhere in between. That's where my
Well,
thinking to be done lies.
it sounds as though you kind of want to iron out the details for some other parts of your transsexual journey so that you can be more confident and have clarity to come out to the remaining people and to live your life in confidence and a clear understanding of like what it means for you to do your wardrobe and to do your hair and makeup and how you act and just everything that kind of comes a part of being masculine or feminine. You want to have all of those components figured out so that it's easier to come out to people that you are MTF.
Yeah.
No, there was a pause in that. All right, what'd I fuck up?
You fuck up transsexual and MTF. Nobody uses those.
Oh, did I say transsexual?
Randomly.
Did I?
You said transsexual and MTF. Usually you can replace
Whoops.
both of those with just the word transgender.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Uh,
Or
I'll
you
figure
stick
out.
to strictly the word transgender, the better you're off. But yeah.
Yeah, that's what I meant to say. I don't know why I said transsexual.
At this point, it's a hack and slash. It's just gotta get through it. Gotta make a to-do list, check them off as I go, and actually just do it. It's not the most difficult thing I've ever done. It's also not the least difficult. So just gotta do it. I think it all comes back to the idea of, talked about it before, just questioning and self-inquiry and going through those arguments that I've laid down. And ultimately, this is very much for me personally tied to the idea of introspection.
Mm-hmm.
And the more I paid attention to my feelings, what I wanted to be, more closely I was able to narrow down what I am.
And what made things worse?
Definitely the self-doubt and the paralyzing fear that I was making a mistake. What made it worse a lot of the time was a lot of this back and forth, super self-doubt, like non-arguments that I'd bring up with myself, like, oh, what if I'm just stupid? Like, that doesn't help me, right? That doesn't help at all. And that was, a super big part of a lot of my self-doubt. And I often found that there are a lot of trans communities and people who have gone through similar experiences being transgender and trying to figure out more things about themselves. But it's both a good thing and a bad thing, because it's a really good thing to feel like you're not alone and that you're not crazy. And that's a super valuable thing to feel. But it's also very negative, because a lot of these people, a lot of trans people in these communities, unfortunately, are very damaged internally with the things they've been through in their life, and aren't always able to give the best solutions.
Yeah, I'd probably add real quick to that when people don't take care of themselves, they have very little room to help others. And when they're kind of pressured to help someone else for whatever reason, it could come out in a very crude and unhelpful way. Especially if...
I will say
Okay.
that trans spaces in general, there's two sides of it. There's three sides of it, okay? There's the sides that talk about the positives and, oh my god, the euphoria and, like, the really great parts of figuring out who you are and what you want to be and making everything feel right to you.
Mm-hmm.
There's of course, the political activist topics, but we won't go into that because that's a fun thing. But there is definitely a section, it's more of a minority in my opinion, but it exists, of trans people who bathe in, the ideas of, depression and self-loathing and, making jokes about at your own expense, or self-deprecating jokes is the term. And, well, and ultimately, like, those kind of people can be very sweet or very much wanting to try to help and very insightful in certain areas.
Mm-hmm.
Ultimately, that depression and self-loathing is going to affect you. And it goes for anybody, any group who, there's a lot of negativity. You should be totally aware of its existence, but you shouldn't engage with it all the time because it will affect you.
So it sounds as though who you surround yourself with and what groups you spend your time in can actually affect your mental health, and if you stay
even
there
more so when that group is a minority or a group that generally has less people in it, because you have less groups to go between, less options sometimes, because those people can have a very, very strong influence on you, especially if you're feeling vulnerable about that topic.
So being transgender and looking for supportive groups that are already few and far between, it's in the minority, and when you finally do find some support and then they end up being that self-loathing and negative type, you initially go to them to have that support, but then you spend a certain amount of time with them and realize that it's actually wearing down on you over time because of the loathing and depression and just the negativity.
And definitely not all transcripts are like that, but they definitely do exist too. It's about being vigilant with who you surround yourself with. And that goes for really anybody, honestly.
What would you like to say to everyone, whether advice, guidance, statement? What would you like to say?
Life, in general, is incredibly hard sometimes and incredibly great sometimes. But going through it is worth it. And finding how you personally can explain what makes it worth it is so invaluable. It's why I talk about being introspective and discovering who you truly are and all these things, because you can add so much value to your life even with a little bit of discomfort most days. Salvatore, do you remember this?
Yeah.
Oh shit. I'm using my good mic, so I have my desk right in front of my face and I'm gonna use my headset mic. I keep hitting it.
Oh, hey, look. You got fish here. And you can pull out your fish. And your fish could eat this fish. Apex predator. Yeah. Yeah. Quit hitting yourself.
Yeah, no. So okay, ready? You ready? Alright, let's catch some fish.
Battle Royale.
Did he get ya? Fuck.
Jeez, man, you just can't stop hitting yourself.
It's right. I don't know. I caught one.
No, it
Don't
keeps
mind it
this.
being larger and disappearing.